You open your eyes to a world of white silence, and the first thing you notice is the absence of the sled. The runners that carried your supplies across 300 miles of frozen wasteland now lie splintered beneath a drift of snow, broken cleanly by the weight of ice that fell from nowhere. The blizzard arrived without warning, as blizzards often do in this land, and now you stand with your companions in the calm that follows destruction. The ancient explorers who came before you knew this feeling. They waited in moments like this one, not with panic, but with patience. Tonight, you will learn why. Before you settle too deeply into this frozen landscape, here is a reminder from the warmth of your own world. If you enjoy what you hear, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly want to. Now, dim the lights. Let your breathing slow. The snow is falling gently now, and the story is about to begin. The year is 1847. The place is somewhere north of the Arctic Circle, in a region so remote that maps from this era show only blank space where land should be. Your expedition set out from a small trading post 6 weeks ago, following rumors of a passage through the ice. The crew numbers 7 souls, each one chosen for skills that might mean the difference between survival and silence. The cold presses against your face like a patient hand waiting for you to make a mistake. You feel the wind drop to nearly nothing, leaving behind a stillness so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat echoing faintly in your ears. The broken sled lies half buried nearby, its wooden frame twisted at an angle that suggests it will never carry weight again. Supplies scatter across the snow in small, dark shapes, barely visible in the dim Arctic light. Each item represents a decision someone made weeks ago, a choice about what might be needed in circumstances no one could fully predict. Now those choices will be tested against reality. A man named Thomas steps forward first. His beard is thick with frost, and his eyes carry the steady calm of someone who has seen worse and survived to tell about it. He kneels beside the wreckage and begins sorting through the debris with methodical precision. His hands move slowly, conserving energy even in this simple task. You watch him work and feel a small measure of comfort in his composure. Leadership sometimes looks like nothing more than staying calm when others might panic. The others gather in a loose circle around the broken sled. There is Margaret, the expedition's navigator, whose knowledge of stars and currents has guided you this far across the trackless ice. Her face shows no fear, only the quiet concentration of someone calculating distances in her head. Beside her stands William, the youngest of the group, barely 20 years old but strong enough to pull a loaded sled for hours without complaint. His breath forms small clouds that drift upward and vanish into the gray sky. Each item represents a decision someone made weeks ago, a choice about what might be needed in circumstances no one could fully predict. Now those choices will be tested against reality. A man named Thomas steps forward first. His beard is thick with frost, and his eyes carry the steady calm of someone who has seen worse and survived to tell about it. He kneels beside the wreckage and begins sorting through the debris with methodical precision. His hands move slowly, conserving energy even in this simple task. You watch him work and feel a small measure of comfort in his composure. Leadership sometimes looks like nothing more than staying calm when others might panic. The others gather in a loose circle around the broken sled. There is Margaret, the expedition's navigator, whose knowledge of stars and currents has guided you this far across the trackless ice. Her face shows no fear, only the quiet concentration of someone calculating distances in her head. Beside her stands William, the youngest of the group, barely 20 years old but strong enough to pull a loaded sled for hours without complaint. His breath forms small clouds that drift upward and vanish into the gray sky. A detail from exploration journals of this era settles into your thoughts like snow settling on stone. Experienced Arctic travelers knew that panic killed faster than cold. The body burns energy when the mind races. Calm preserves warmth. Patience extends survival. These were not abstract ideas, but practical wisdom earned through generations of hard lessons on the ice. The men and women who wrote those journals paid for their knowledge in ways that cannot be measured. You step closer to the wreckage and begin helping Thomas sort the supplies. Your fingers feel stiff inside your mittens, but they still function. The cold has not yet claimed them. Together, you separate the damaged from the salvageable. A canvas tent, torn but repairable. A small iron stove, dented but intact. Dried meat wrapped in oilcloth, still frozen solid. A coil of rope. A hunting knife. The inventory grows slowly, each item a small victory against the vastness surrounding you. Every object you recover represents possibility. Every possibility represents hope. Margaret points toward a low ridge of ice perhaps 200 yards distant. Her voice is calm when she speaks, barely louder than the wind that has begun to whisper again. She suggests making camp there, where the ridge might offer shelter from whatever weather comes next. The others nod without argument. In conditions like these, decisions must be quick but not hasty. Delay invites disaster. Hesitation freezes faster than flesh. But rushing leads to mistakes that cannot be corrected. The group begins moving toward the ridge, carrying what they can salvage from the wreckage. You take the coiled rope over one shoulder and the iron stove under your arm. The stove feels impossibly heavy, but you know its weight represents warmth, and warmth represents life. Each step through the snow requires effort. The surface crunches beneath your boots, sometimes holding your weight, sometimes giving way to swallow your leg up to the knee. Progress is measured in small distances. William walks beside you, matching your pace despite carrying a heavier load. He tells you quietly that he has never seen a storm break so suddenly. One moment the sky was clear and blue, the next it was white with fury. He does not sound frightened, only curious, as though the blizzard were a puzzle he has not yet solved. His curiosity reminds you why young men join expeditions like this one. They seek answers to questions they cannot yet name. They walk toward horizons because horizons exist. The ridge draws closer with each careful step. You notice how the ice has formed in layers here, each one representing a different season, a different storm, a different year of accumulated cold. The layers tell a story if you know how to read them. Margaret certainly does. She pauses occasionally to study the formations, filing away information that might prove useful later. Knowledge is a form of warmth in places like this. Understanding your environment increases your chances of surviving it. When you reach the ridge, Thomas immediately begins clearing a space for the tent. His movements remain measured and efficient, wasting no energy on unnecessary motions. He scrapes away loose snow with his boots, exposing a firmer surface beneath. The others join him, working together without needing instructions. Survival requires cooperation, and cooperation requires trust built through countless smaller moments of shared effort. This group has traveled together long enough to develop that trust. A curious piece of Arctic lore drifts through your memory like a half-remembered dream. Some indigenous peoples of the far north believed that storms carried spirits who tested travelers. Those who remained calm earned safe passage. Those who panicked invited further trials. Whether or not you believe such things, the idea contains a kernel of practical truth. Your response to difficulty shapes the difficulty itself. Fear makes everything harder. Calm makes everything possible. The tent rises slowly against the gray sky, its canvas walls flapping gently in the light breeze that has replaced the howling wind. The fabric is darker where moisture has seeped through, but the seams hold. Margaret and William secure the corners with stakes driven deep into the packed snow. The structure looks fragile against the endless white landscape, a small human gesture against the indifferent vastness. Yet it represents civilization, a boundary between your small group and the frozen world beyond. Inside the tent, the darkness feels almost warm. The walls block the wind and trap the faint heat rising from 7 bodies pressed close together. You position the iron stove near the center and begin preparing a small fire using dried moss and slivers of wood salvaged from the broken sled. The first spark catches, then grows, then spreads into a modest flame that seems impossibly bright in the confined space. Fire has always meant survival. Fire has always meant hope. The others settle around the stove, extending their hands toward the heat like worshippers before an altar. Faces that looked pale and strained outside now begin to relax. Color returns to cheeks. Fingers uncurl from protective fists. The simple act of warming yourself becomes almost ceremonial, a ritual of recovery repeated countless times by countless travelers across countless generations. You are not the first to seek warmth in this land. You will not be the last. Thomas produces a small pot and begins melting snow for drinking water. The process takes time, but no one complains. Water means survival. Everything else can wait. You watch the snow transform slowly from solid to liquid, a quiet miracle unfolding in the flickering light. The steam rises in delicate curls that disappear into the tent's shadowy upper reaches. A woman named Elizabeth sits across from you, her face partially illuminated by the fire's glow. She serves as the expedition's physician, though her role extends far beyond treating wounds. She observes everyone constantly, noting changes in behavior, monitoring signs of frostbite, assessing mental states that might indicate the early stages of cold-induced confusion. Her eyes move from face to face with gentle attentiveness. Caring for others requires seeing them clearly. She asks Thomas to remove his mittens so she can examine his fingers. He complies without hesitation, extending his hands toward the light. The skin looks pale, but not dangerously so. She nods with quiet satisfaction and moves on to the next person. These small examinations happen so naturally that they barely interrupt the flow of conversation. Survival includes caring for one another. No one survives the Arctic alone. Community is not a luxury, but a necessity. The dried meat makes its way around the circle like a communion offering. Each person takes a modest portion, chewing slowly to extract every bit of nourishment. The meat is tough and salty, but it tastes like comfort. Your body recognizes the calories it contains and begins the slow work of converting them into warmth. You feel strength seeping back into muscles that felt hollow moments ago. Food is fuel. Fuel is life. Outside, the wind remains calm. Through a small gap in the tent flap, you catch glimpses of the sky beginning to clear. Stars emerge one by one, pinpricks of ancient light scattered across the darkness. The aurora might appear later, Margaret mentions. Conditions seem favorable. Her voice carries a note of quiet wonder beneath the practical assessment. Even in survival situations, beauty matters, perhaps especially in survival situations. A detail preserved in many exploration narratives touches your mind like a cool hand on a warm forehead. Stranded travelers often found unexpected beauty in their circumstances. The same conditions that threatened their lives also revealed scenes of extraordinary magnificence. Ice crystals catching firelight, stars reflected in frozen pools, the silence of a world untouched by human noise. These moments of beauty did not diminish the danger, but they offered something the danger could not touch. They offered meaning. You lean back against the tent wall, letting your eyes adjust to the dim interior. The fire has settled into a steady burn, its heat radiating outward in invisible waves. Your companions speak in low voices about practical matters. How far are we from shelter? How long will the supplies last? Can the sled be repaired? Each question receives a thoughtful answer, not rushed, not panicked, simply honest. Honesty is another form of warmth in situations like this. The conversation gradually shifts to quieter topics as the fire crackles and settles. William mentions his younger sister back home, how she made him promise to bring her a piece of Arctic ice. He laughs softly, acknowledging the impossibility of keeping such a promise. The ice would melt long before he reached warmer latitudes. But the thought of her waiting for him adds warmth to his voice that has nothing to do with the fire. Love keeps people warm across any distance. Margaret shares a memory of learning to navigate by stars as a child. Her father taught her, patient and methodical, pointing out constellations on clear summer nights when she should have been asleep. She never imagined those lessons would one day help guide an expedition across frozen seas. Life unfolds in ways we cannot predict, she observes. We can only prepare as best we can and trust ourselves to adapt. Preparation meets opportunity in ways we cannot foresee. Elizabeth tells a story about a patient she once treated, a fur trapper who survived 3 weeks alone after breaking his leg in the wilderness. The man credited his survival not to strength or skill, but to stubbornness. He simply refused to stop breathing until help arrived. The story earns quiet smiles around the circle. Stubbornness, it seems, counts as a survival skill. Perhaps it is the most important skill of all. Thomas remains mostly silent, but his presence feels solid and reassuring like a rock in a stream. He tends the fire with practiced movements, adding small pieces of fuel at careful intervals. His attention never wavers. You realize that his calm is not accidental, but cultivated, a discipline developed over years of living in harsh places where composure meant the difference between life and death. Some people learn calm, others are born with it. The 7th member of your expedition is a man named Henrik, originally from a coastal village far to the north where ice and sea have shaped every aspect of life for generations. His knowledge of ice and snow surpasses everyone else's. He reads the landscape the way others read books, interpreting signs that remain invisible to untrained eyes. Now he sits near the tent entrance, listening to sounds you cannot hear, watching patterns you cannot see. His stillness is productive. Henrik speaks rarely, but when he does, everyone listens with full attention. He mentions that the ice beneath you feels stable. The ridge provides adequate shelter. The storm is moving east and will not return. Tomorrow the sky will clear further. His predictions carry the weight of experience. You find yourself trusting his assessment more than you trust your own senses. Some knowledge can only be earned through years of living. A piece of traditional knowledge shared among Arctic peoples enters your thoughts like a whisper from the past. Survival depends on reading the world correctly. Not just the obvious signs, but the subtle ones. The color of the ice, the direction of drifting snow, the behavior of animals, the feel of the wind against exposed skin. These signals form a language that the land itself speaks to those patient enough to learn. The land always speaks. The question is whether you know how to listen. Hours pass inside the tent while the fire burns and the cold waits outside. The flames burn low, then receive fresh fuel, then burn low again. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Your body grows heavy with exhaustion, but the heaviness feels safe, protective, like the weight of warm blankets. The voices around you blur into a gentle murmur that seems to come from very far away. Sleep approaches like a friend. You close your eyes for what feels like a moment. When you open them again, the quality of light has changed completely. Morning has arrived. though the difference between Arctic night and Arctic day remains subtle at this time of year. The tent glows faintly, illuminated by weak sunlight filtering through the canvas walls. Your companions stir slowly, emerging from sleep with careful movements that test whether everything still works. Thomas already has water warming over the revived fire. The smell of melting snow fills the tent with a clean, mineral scent that speaks of purity and cold. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness in your joints, then flex your fingers to confirm they still move properly. Everything works. Another day has begun. Another day of survival stretches ahead. Outside, the world reveals itself in shades of white and pale blue and silver gray. The storm has passed completely, leaving behind a landscape that looks freshly made. Snow covers the broken sled, the scattered supplies, the footprints from yesterday. Everything has been smoothed over, reset, offered a second chance at being discovered. The world has rewritten itself overnight. The group emerges one by one, squinting against the brightness that seems almost painful after the tense darkness. Henrik immediately begins scanning the horizon, reading the ice with quiet concentration. Margaret checks her compass and makes notes in a small journal she keeps tucked inside her coat. William stamps his feet to restore circulation, his breath rising in rhythmic puffs. Elizabeth examines everyone's faces, checking for signs of frostbite in the harsh morning light. Thomas approaches the buried sled and begins digging with his mittened hands. The others join him gradually, and soon the wreckage emerges from its snowy shroud. The damage looks worse in daylight. Several runners are completely shattered. The frame has twisted beyond any easy repair. The sled that carried your expedition across hundreds of miles will not carry anything again. Its journey has ended here. A moment of silence falls over the group as everyone absorbs what this means. Without the sled, you cannot transport the heavier supplies. Without the heavier supplies, your options narrow considerably. The mathematics of survival have shifted, and everyone is recalculating in their heads. The numbers do not lie, but neither do they tell the whole story. Numbers cannot measure determination. Henrik breaks the silence with a practical observation delivered in his quiet voice. He points toward a distant shape on the horizon, barely visible against the white sky. It might be land, he says, or it might be an iceberg. Either way, it represents a destination, a point to move toward while the weather holds. Standing still helps no one. Movement creates possibility. Margaret consults her charts, such as they are. The expedition entered unmapped territory days ago, but she has been tracking their position by dead reckoning, estimating distance and direction based on speed and time. Her calculations suggest a coastline might lie within 2 days' travel. Might. The uncertainty in her voice is honest. No one asks for guarantees that cannot be given. Uncertainty is the price of exploration. The group begins sorting supplies again, this time with different criteria than before. What can be carried by hand? What must be left behind? What weighs too much in relation to its usefulness? These decisions feel almost sacred in their gravity. Each choice might influence whether someone lives or dies. Each item accepted or rejected carries consequences that cannot be fully known. You help distribute the load among the group members, balancing weight against strength. Food and fire-making supplies take priority over everything else. The tent remains essential despite its weight. Medical supplies fit into Elizabeth's pack. Navigation tools go with Margaret. The iron stove, so precious last night, becomes a difficult question. Henrik solves it by fashioning a simple drag using rope and salvaged wood from the broken sled. One person can pull the stove while the others walk lighter. The morning stretches into what passes for midday in this land of endless twilight. The sun hangs low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ice. The temperature remains brutal but bearable. Layers of clothing trap body heat. Movement generates warmth. As long as you keep moving, the cold remains manageable. The cold is patient, but so are you. The group sets out toward Henrik's distant shape, moving in single file to conserve energy. Each person steps into the footprints of the person ahead, avoiding the effort of breaking fresh trail through the snow. The rhythm establishes itself naturally, a shared heartbeat of progress measured in careful steps. One foot, then the other. Repeat. The simplicity is almost peaceful. You find yourself walking behind Elizabeth. Her pace is steady and unhurried, the pace of someone who understands that marathons are won by consistency rather than speed. Every few minutes, she glances back to check on the person behind her. The small gesture repeats so reliably that it becomes almost invisible, yet you notice it each time. Caring becomes automatic when it becomes habit. The landscape passes slowly, like a dream that refuses to end. Ice formations rise and fall like frozen waves caught mid-motion. Pressure ridges create obstacles that require careful navigation around their jagged edges. Henrik leads the way, choosing paths that minimize climbing and maximize progress. His knowledge seems almost instinctive, as though he has traveled this exact route before, even though no one has. Some people simply understand certain places. A detail from Henrik's homeland traditions surfaces in your thoughts like a bubble rising through deep water. His people believed that the ice remembered everyone who crossed it. Good travelers left light footprints and received safe passage. Careless travelers left heavy marks and invited trouble. The belief encouraged respect for the environment, treating even frozen water as a living thing deserving consideration. Respect costs nothing but yields much. Hours blend together until time loses meaning. The monotony of walking becomes almost meditative, a rhythm that requires no thought. Your mind drifts between awareness of your body and something more distant, a quiet observation of thoughts rising and falling like breaths. The cold recedes to background sensation. The effort of movement becomes automatic. You exist in a simplified state where only the next step matters. William begins humming a tune, barely audible above the crunch of snow beneath boots. The melody is simple and repetitive, something he probably learned as a child in a warm kitchen far from here. It drifts back through the line of walkers, adding a human element to the vast silence. No one asks him to stop. The sound feels like company, in a place where company matters more than almost anything. Margaret calls a halt near a particularly large pressure ridge that blocks the most direct path forward. The ice here has been pushed upward by forces beneath the surface, creating a wall of jagged formations that would be dangerous to climb. Henrik studies the obstacle carefully before selecting a route that angles around rather than over. The detour adds distance, but avoids the risk of injury on unstable ice. Safety matters more than speed. During the pause, Thomas distributes small portions of dried meat and melted snow water carried in leather flasks. The routine feels familiar now, almost comfortable. Eating and drinking on the march requires discipline. Too much food draws blood to the stomach and away from extremities. Too little fuel leaves the body without resources to generate warmth. Balance matters in everything. Balance is survival. Elizabeth takes the opportunity to check feet and hands around the group, examining skin for early signs of damage. Frostbite begins quietly, often without pain. Catching it early makes treatment possible. Catching it late leads to consequences no one wants to discuss. Her examinations are brief but thorough. Everyone passes inspection for now. The cold has not yet won. You find yourself thinking about the broken sled as you walk. The loss still stings, but the sting has softened with distance. Situations change, plans adapt. The sled served its purpose for as long as it could. Now you carry its function inside yourselves, distributed among 7 people instead of concentrated in one wooden frame. Perhaps that makes the expedition stronger rather than weaker. Distributed strength resists failure. The afternoon light begins fading, even though true darkness remains hours away. The sun traces its low arc toward the horizon, painting the ice in shades of gold and rose and deep purple. The colors seem impossibly vivid against the white backdrop. You pause briefly to absorb the beauty, knowing it will not last, knowing nothing this beautiful ever does. Beauty is always temporary. That is part of what makes it beautiful. Henrik signals that the group should cover more distance before stopping for the night. The shape on the horizon has grown slightly larger, though its identity remains uncertain. It could still be land. It could still be an illusion created by refracted light. The Arctic plays tricks on eyes accustomed to more temperate landscapes. Only time will reveal the truth. Only walking will close the distance. The walking resumes with renewed purpose. Your legs feel heavier now, the accumulated effort making itself known in muscles that ache. But heaviness is not the same as exhaustion. You still have reserves. Everyone still has reserves. The real test lies somewhere ahead, and you must arrive there with something left to give. Pacing matters when the distance is unknown. A thin crack appears in the ice beneath your feet, a dark line against the white surface. You step over it without breaking stride. Such cracks are common on sea ice, evidence of the constant movement happening below the frozen surface. Most cracks mean nothing. Some mean everything. Learning to tell the difference requires attention that never fully relaxes. The ice is always speaking. Margaret drops back to walk beside you for a while, her breath forming small clouds that drift alongside yours. She mentions that navigation in these conditions feels like steering by faith. The instruments provide information, but the information requires interpretation. Sometimes the best choice comes from gut feeling shaped by experience. She has learned to trust that feeling even when she cannot explain it. Intuition is accumulated wisdom. The conversation drifts to her family, waiting somewhere impossibly far away across thousands of miles of ice and ocean. She has a husband and 2 daughters who believe in her completely. They sent letters before the expedition departed, filled with encouragement and love. She carries those letters next to her heart, literal warmth against the cold. Reading them sometimes feels like hearing their voices across the distance. You share something about your own reasons for joining this expedition, words coming slowly because you have not fully understood those reasons yourself. Perhaps you sought adventure. Perhaps you wanted to test yourself against something larger than ordinary life. Perhaps you simply needed to walk toward a horizon you could not see and trust that walking would be enough. The reasons matter less than the commitment to continue. The group stops as evening deepens across the frozen landscape. Henrik has found another suitable campsite, a hollow between 2 ice ridges that offers natural protection from wind. The tent goes up more quickly this time, hands remembering what minds might have forgotten. The routine of survival establishes itself through repetition. What was difficult becomes easier. What was uncertain becomes known. Inside the tent, the fire returns to life with a crackling welcome. Warmth spreads outward in familiar waves. Faces that looked gray and drawn outside begin recovering their color. The transformation feels almost magical, though it is simply chemistry, bodies responding to heat, blood flowing back to skin that had withdrawn inward for protection. Science explains the magic without diminishing it. Thomas produces the last significant portion of dried meat and divides it with careful fairness. Tomorrow, the group will need to find food or begin rationing more severely. Henrik mentions that seals sometimes appear near pressure ridges. Birds might be found near open water. The Arctic is not empty despite its apparent desolation. Life exists here, adapted to conditions that seem impossible. Finding that life requires patience and skill. A curious piece of survival wisdom enters your thoughts from some half-remembered book or conversation. Hunger in the Arctic differs from hunger in warmer climates. The body burns calories faster in cold, demanding more fuel simply to maintain temperature. But the body also adapts, slowing its metabolism when food becomes scarce, entering a conservation mode that extends survival beyond what mathematics might predict. The body is wiser than the mind gives it credit for. Elizabeth speaks quietly about the importance of mental attitude, her voice soft in the firelit darkness. She has read accounts of survivors who had no logical reason to survive, yet somehow did. She has also read accounts of people who died despite having adequate supplies and shelter. The difference often came down to something immeasurable, a will to continue that transcended physical circumstances. The mind saves or destroys the body. The conversation turns to stories of survival, shared around the fire like offerings to some ancient understanding of human endurance. Each person contributes something. A tale heard from a grandfather, an account read in a book, a personal experience of difficulty overcome. The stories accumulate, building a shared mythology of resilience. We survive partly through the stories we tell ourselves. William tells of his first winter working on a fishing boat, when storms kept the crew at sea for 3 weeks beyond their planned return. They ran out of fresh water and collected rain in barrels. They ran out of familiar food and ate things they would never admit to eating. But they survived, every single one of them, because giving up was simply not an option anyone considered. Options matter. Choosing wisely matters more. Margaret recalls a time she was lost in wilderness for 2 days as a young woman. She had wandered too far from her father's camp, following an interesting rock formation, and then could not find her way back. Fear nearly overwhelmed her, but she forced herself to stop, think, and make a plan. Following a stream downhill eventually brought her to a valley she recognized. Panic helps nothing. Planning helps everything. Henrik shares a story from his village about a hunter who became trapped on drifting ice for nearly a month. The man survived by building shelter from ice blocks, catching fish through holes he carved with his knife, and maintaining a signal fire that eventually attracted a passing ship. His patience became legendary. Children learned his story as a lesson in calm persistence. Patience is not passive. Patience is active waiting. Thomas does not tell a story, but he nods along as others speak, his face thoughtful in the firelight. His silence communicates its own kind of wisdom. Some people survive by talking through difficulty. Others survive by conserving words for action. Both approaches have merit. The tent holds space for both. Community includes all types. The fire settles into steady embers as the night deepens. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, making the tent walls ripple like breathing lungs. The sound is almost soothing, a reminder that the world continues moving even while you rest. Sleep begins pulling at your eyelids, heavy and insistent. Your body demands rest to continue tomorrow. Elizabeth suggests that everyone try to sleep while conditions allow. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, and meeting them requires strength. The group arranges itself around the stove, bodies positioned for maximum warmth sharing. Breath slows, muscles relax. The tent becomes a shared cocoon of warmth suspended in the frozen world. Together, you are warmer than alone. You drift into sleep gradually, your mind floating between wakefulness and dream. Images flicker past without demanding attention. The broken sled, the distant shape on the horizon, the faces of your companions in firelight. Everything blends together into something soft and formless. Sleep takes you gently. When you wake, the quality of light has changed again. Morning has arrived with its pale glow filtering through canvas walls. Thomas already tends the fire with quiet efficiency. Water warms in the small pot. The routine repeats, reliable as the sun's slow arc across the sky. Survival is mostly routine. Routine is mostly survival. Outside, the weather holds steady and clear. No new storms approach from any direction. The air feels colder but calmer, the kind of cold that respects stillness and does not seek to harm. Henrik emerges first, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes. His expression changes slightly, and he calls the others to look at what he sees. The distant shape has resolved itself overnight. It is land, real land, not an illusion, not a trick of light. A dark mass rises from the ice perhaps half a day's travel away. Rocky outcrops suggest mountains, or at least significant hills. Where there is land, there might be shelter. Where there is shelter, there might be a chance to rest and recover properly. Land changes everything. The discovery lifts spirits throughout the group. Faces that had settled into grim determination now show cautious hope. No one celebrates prematurely. The Arctic has taught everyone that optimism must be tempered with caution. But the presence of land changes everything. It provides a goal more concrete than the vague shape on the horizon. It promises something solid beneath feet that have walked on frozen water for too long. The group breaks camp efficiently, packing with energy that seemed depleted just yesterday. The prospect of reaching land motivates muscles that wanted to rest. Even the iron stove on its makeshift drag feels lighter. Or perhaps the person pulling it simply finds more strength to give. Hope provides its own kind of fuel. The march toward land begins under a sky striped with high clouds. The sun provides little warmth but plenty of light, illuminating the path ahead with crystalline clarity. Ice formations cast blue shadows that shift as the day progresses. The landscape seems almost friendly now, though you know better than to trust appearances completely. The Arctic is never truly friendly. Henrik sets a pace that balances urgency with sustainability. Reaching land helps nothing if people arrive too exhausted to function. The group moves in single file as before, each person stepping into the footprints of the person ahead. The rhythm becomes automatic, almost hypnotic. Walk, breathe, walk, breathe. Simple, effective. As you walk, you notice subtle changes in the ice beneath your feet. The color shifts from pure white to something with more gray in it. The texture feels different underfoot, more granular, less slippery. These changes indicate proximity to shore, where the interaction between land and sea creates different conditions. Henrik reads these signs like text, adjusting the route based on information invisible to others. The ice speaks to those who know its language. A pressure ridge blocks the most direct path to the shore. The group curves around it, adding perhaps an hour to the journey. No one complains. Shortcuts that lead to injury help no one. Patience continues proving its value, one careful step at a time. The long way is sometimes the short way. Margaret checks her position using the sun's angle and her compass. The readings confirm what eyes already see. Land lies ahead, perhaps 4 hours of travel remaining. She shares this information with quiet confidence, and the group absorbs it without breaking stride. 4 hours. 4 more hours of walking. Then, something different. During a brief rest, Elizabeth examines feet and hands again with her usual thoroughness. The news is mostly good. One of William's toes shows early signs of frostbite, pale and slightly numb. Elizabeth treats it immediately, warming the toe against her own body until color returns. The intervention might save the toe. Might. That uncertainty hangs in the cold air like a silent prayer. The afternoon advances with agonizing slowness. The land grows larger, more detailed, more real with every step. Individual rocks become visible. The shape of the coastline reveals itself. A bay curves inward, potentially offering protected access to shore. Henrik points toward the bay and adjusts the group's direction accordingly. The destination sharpens into focus. A small piece of expedition history surfaces in your memory from some book read long ago. Many famous Arctic journeys ended not in triumph but in tragedy because travelers pushed too hard when caution was required. Ships became trapped in ice they should have avoided. Parties attempted crossings in conditions that guaranteed failure. The lesson repeated itself across generations. Respect for the environment matters more than ambition. The final stretch feels endless despite being the shortest part of the journey. Anticipation makes distance seem to stretch. Every step brings you closer, yet land seems to stay fixed on the horizon, a destination that refuses to arrive. You force yourself to focus only on the next footprint, the next breath, the next moment. The land will come when it comes. Patience. And then it does. The ice gives way to rocky shore so gradually that the transition seems almost imperceptible. One step, you stand on frozen sea. The next step, you stand on something that has never floated. The change registers slowly in tired minds. Henrik kneels and touches the rock with his bare hand, confirming what everyone wants desperately to believe. Solid ground. You have reached land. The group does not cheer. Energy for celebration remains in short supply. Instead, people simply stand on solid ground and breathe, letting the reality settle into bodies that have been walking on uncertainty for too long. The rock beneath your feet feels impossibly stable. It does not shift. It does not crack. It simply is. Permanence feels like luxury. Thomas begins scouting for a campsite immediately, his pragmatism serving the group well. Reaching land means nothing if you cannot establish shelter before the next weather change. He moves along the shore, studying formations, looking for natural protection from wind. His expertise shows in every careful assessment. He knows what he is looking for. The shore reveals a narrow beach of gravel and stone, backed by low cliffs that rise toward the interior. A small cave or deep overhang might provide better shelter than the tent. Thomas searches systematically, calling out observations to the group following behind. His voice carries confidence without arrogance. Margaret studies the coastline with navigator's eyes. She looks for landmarks that might appear on older charts, features that could help establish their position more precisely. Recognition flickers across her face. She points toward a distinctive rock formation and mentions seeing something similar described in an account from decades earlier. The description matches imperfectly, but the possibility of knowing where they are offers its own kind of warmth. William finds driftwood scattered along the beach like gifts from the sea. Wood in the Arctic is precious, evidence that currents carry material from distant forests. He begins gathering pieces, adding to the fuel supply that had dwindled alarmingly. Each piece of wood represents warmth, represents life extended. His arms fill quickly with the unexpected bounty. The sea provides. Elizabeth tends to the group, watching for signs of collapse now that the goal has been reached. Sometimes the body holds itself together until safety is achieved, then releases everything at once. She moves from person to person, offering quiet words and careful observation. Her vigilance continues even as others relax. Henrik continues reading the landscape even here on solid ground. He studies the sky, the water, the way snow lies on rock. His assessment is cautiously optimistic. This place offers protection. Game might be found nearby. The conditions for survival have improved dramatically. But survival still requires effort. Improvement is not the same as safety. Thomas returns with news of a cave. Not large, but deep enough to shelter everyone from wind and weather. The entrance faces away from the prevailing winds. The floor is dry rock. It will serve. The group moves toward the cave with renewed purpose, bodies responding to the promise of real rest. The cave exceeds expectations. Its walls curve protectively overhead like hands cupped around something precious. Natural formations create spaces that feel almost like rooms. A small ledge provides a platform for the stove. The floor is uneven but manageable. Compared to the tent pitched on ice, this feels like luxury beyond measure. You help establish the camp with hands that have learned efficiency through repetition. The tent becomes a ground sheet and additional insulation. The stove finds its place on the ledge. William's gathered driftwood creates a substantial fuel pile. The fire that springs to life seems brighter, warmer, more alive than any fire before. The cave walls reflect heat back into the space, creating warmth that touches every surface. Margaret produces her journal and begins writing by firelight. The act seems almost ceremonial, a commitment to memory what might otherwise fade. Her pen moves steadily across the page, recording the journey, the sled's destruction, the march across ice, the arrival at land. Future readers might learn from this account. Or the journal might be discovered decades later, telling a story whose ending remains unwritten. Evening settles over the cave like a blanket being drawn up. Outside, the Arctic landscape glows with the pale light of stars just beginning to appear. Inside, the fire crackles steadily, its smoke finding an exit through cracks in the cave ceiling. The air smells of burning driftwood and the faint mineral tang of stone. Your body begins acknowledging how tired it truly is. The group shares a meal that feels almost festive despite its simplicity. Portions remain small, but the atmosphere has changed. Hope adds flavor that salt cannot match. Conversation flows more easily, touching on lighter topics. William tells a joke that earns genuine laughter. Margaret describes a meal she plans to enjoy when she returns home. Henrik shares a word from his language that has no direct translation, but means something like joy in survival. Thomas sits near the cave entrance, keeping watch from habit rather than necessity. His vigilance never truly relaxes, but it softens in the shelter's safety. He mentions that tomorrow the group should explore the area, looking for game and fresh water. The coast might offer opportunities they have not yet discovered. Planning continues even in rest. Elizabeth expresses satisfaction with everyone's condition in her quiet physician's voice. The frostbite on William's toe has not worsened. No one shows signs of serious injury. Morale has improved measurably. The human body, she observes, possesses remarkable resilience when circumstances allow hope to grow. Hope heals. A detail from medical writings of this era enters your thoughts like a remembered lesson. Doctors who studied survival noted that mental state influenced physical recovery. Patients who believed they would heal often healed faster. Patients who despaired often declined despite adequate treatment. The connection between mind and body worked in both directions. Belief matters. Sleep comes easily that night. The cave floor feels harder than any mattress, but the rock beneath you is land, solid and unmoving. Your body surrenders to exhaustion with something approaching gratitude. The fire's warmth reaches deep into tired muscles, easing tensions that accumulated over days of walking. Rest is earned. Dreams visit without drama. Images of home drift past like clouds. Faces of people waiting far away appear and recede. The sound of voices speaking in familiar accents blends with the crackle of flames. Everything feels soft, distant, safe. You sleep more deeply than you have in weeks. Morning arrives with a gentleness that surprises you. Light filters into the cave through the entrance, painting the walls with pale gold. The fire has burned low, but not out. Thomas tends it quietly, adding fuel with the careful economy of someone who respects resources. His movements seem less tense than yesterday. The land has changed him, too. The group wakes gradually, testing limbs against rock. Faces carry the relaxed expression of people who have actually rested. The difference from yesterday seems remarkable. A single night of proper shelter has restored something that days of walking had steadily depleted. Shelter heals. Breakfast consists of the last significant portion of dried meat, divided carefully among 7 people. The supply situation remains serious, but the seriousness feels more manageable now. Land offers possibilities that ice did not. Henrik mentions tracks he noticed near the cave entrance before dark. Animals live here. Animals can be caught. Possibility exists. The exploration party forms naturally. Henrik leads, his tracking skills essential. Thomas accompanies him, providing practical support and additional eyes. The others remain at the cave, conserving energy while continuing to improve the shelter. Division of labor makes sense when resources must be stretched. Everyone contributes according to ability. You watch Henrik and Thomas depart, their figures growing smaller against the rocky landscape before disappearing around a promontory. Their absence makes the cave feel slightly emptier, but the emptiness is temporary. They will return with information if not food. Knowledge of the area might prove as valuable as meat. Information sustains. Margaret continues her journal work, adding sketches of the coastline to her written observations. Her drawings are simple but accurate, capturing essential features that might help future travelers recognize this place. She works with the focused intensity of someone who believes their efforts matter beyond their own survival. Legacy motivates. Elizabeth inventories the remaining medical supplies with careful attention. The count is sobering. Some items have been exhausted entirely. Others remain in quantities that require careful rationing. She makes notes about what might be improvised from natural materials. Arctic peoples have sustained themselves for thousands of years without modern medicine. Their methods might still work. Adaptation continues. William organizes the fuel supply, sorting driftwood by size and dryness. His methodical approach transforms a scattered pile into something resembling a proper woodshed. Small tasks like this one maintain both order and morale. Activity prevents the mind from dwelling on concerns that cannot be immediately addressed. Work heals. Hours pass in productive quiet. The sun traces its low arc across the sky, visible through the cave entrance as a pale disk that seems to float rather than climb. The light quality changes subtly, shifting from gold to silver to something in between. Time feels different here, measured not by clocks but by the rhythm of breath and the progress of simple tasks. Henrik and Thomas return in the early afternoon. Their expressions tell the story before their words do. Henrik carries a bundle wrapped in cloth. Thomas shoulders a larger form that reveals itself as a small seal. Food, real food, enough to sustain the group for days if managed carefully. Success. The cave transforms with activity. Henrik demonstrates the proper method for processing the seal, explaining each step with patient precision. The animal provides meat, fat, and materials for other uses. Nothing goes to waste. Every part serves a purpose. This is the Arctic way, learned over generations and shared freely among those willing to learn. The meal that follows feels almost sacred. Fresh meat cooked over flame releases aromas that dried provisions never could. Fat renders into oil that can be burned for light and additional heat. The flavors are rich and unfamiliar, but bodies recognize the nourishment and respond with deep satisfaction. Food heals. Margaret mentions that the coast extends further than she expected. Henrik's exploration revealed additional caves, potential sources of fresh water, and signs of bird colonies that might be reached later. The area appears more hospitable than first impressions suggested. Options exist here that simply did not exist on the ice. Possibility multiplies. Thomas reports on the defensive qualities of the location. The terrain discourages approach from certain directions. Visibility extends far enough to provide warning of changes in weather. The cave offers multiple exit routes in case of emergency. These observations might seem paranoid, but they reflect experience with environments that punish the unprepared. Preparation protects. Elizabeth asks detailed questions about the seal's condition, looking for information about the local ecosystem. A healthy seal suggests a healthy food chain. Prey species must exist in sufficient numbers to support predators. These relationships create possibilities for sustained survival rather than merely delayed starvation. Ecology matters. The conversation continues through the afternoon and into evening. Plans form gradually, tested against available information, adjusted based on different perspectives. The group functions as a unit now, each person contributing according to their strengths. The sled's destruction, once a disaster, has become a distant memory. What matters is what happens next. Henrik suggests that the group remain at this location for at least several days. The coast provides resources that would be difficult to find elsewhere. The cave offers shelter superior to anything they could construct. Rest and recovery should take priority. Sometimes the wisest action is no action at all. Waiting can be wisdom. The suggestion meets no resistance. Everyone's body understands the value of rest. Muscles that have been in constant use need time to repair. Minds that have been calculating survival need space to simply exist. The cave has become a sanctuary, and sanctuaries deserve more than a single night's occupation. Staying can be progress. Days blend together in a rhythm shaped by basic needs. Wake, eat, maintain shelter, explore nearby areas, rest. The simplicity feels almost liberating. The complications of ordinary life seem impossibly distant. Here, only essential questions matter. Is there food? Is there warmth? Is there safety? Yes, yes, yes. The answers bring peace. Henrik teaches the others what he knows about Arctic survival. His lessons unfold naturally, prompted by whatever situation presents itself. How to read weather signs in cloud formations. How to identify safe ice from dangerous ice. How to preserve meat using cold alone. The knowledge accumulates like layers of warm clothing, each piece adding protection against the unknown. Margaret's navigation notes grow increasingly detailed. She cross-references observations with historical accounts, building a picture of the surrounding geography. Her work might one day help others traveling this coast. The possibility of contributing to future expeditions gives her efforts additional meaning. Purpose sustains. Thomas discovers a freshwater source about half a mile from the cave. A small stream emerges from the rocks, fed by snowmelt from higher elevations. The water tastes clean and cold, free from the mineral heaviness of seawater. Freshwater represents security. It means they can remain here indefinitely if necessary. Water is life. Elizabeth treats minor injuries that accumulated during the journey. Blisters, scrapes, the lingering frostbite on William's toe. Each case receives her full attention. Healing happens slowly but visibly. Colors return to flesh that looked gray. Mobility improves in joints that felt stiff. The body's resilience continues demonstrating itself. Healing continues. William takes on the role of fuel gatherer with enthusiasm. He explores the beach daily, adding to the driftwood supply with each trip. His pile grows until it resembles a small mountain of potential warmth. The abundance feels almost excessive, but no one suggests stopping. Excess fuel means security. Security cannot be overvalued. Abundance comforts. One evening, the aurora appears. Sheets of green and pale purple light ripple across the sky, casting shifting colors across the ice and rock. The group gathers outside the cave to watch, necks craned upward, faces illuminated by the celestial display. No one speaks. Words seem inadequate for something this beautiful. Silence honors. The lights dance for hours, sometimes fading almost to invisibility, then returning with renewed intensity. Henrik mentions that his people tell stories about the aurora, explaining its origins in terms of spirits and ancestors. He does not claim the stories are literally true, but he suggests they contain a kind of truth that science cannot quite capture. Mystery enriches. You stand among your companions, watching light move across the sky in patterns that seem both random and purposeful. The cold presses against exposed skin, but you barely notice it. Beauty has its own warmth. The aurora gives without asking anything in return. It simply exists, performing for an audience that numbers only 7. Beauty heals. When the display finally fades, the group returns to the cave in contemplative silence. The fire welcomes them back with steady warmth. Sleep comes easily, filled with dreams that carry fragments of green light. Peace settles. The days continue passing in their rhythm. The group settles into routines that feel increasingly permanent. Survival, once a constant struggle, becomes manageable. The crisis that began with a broken sled has transformed into something resembling stability. Not comfort exactly, not safety in any absolute sense, but something close enough to let bodies and minds begin healing. Margaret estimates that the group has been at the cave for 10 days when the weather shifts. The change begins subtly, clouds thickening on the horizon, wind picking up from a new direction. Henrik reads the signs with deepening concern. A storm approaches, not immediately dangerous, but significant. The cave will provide protection, but the group should prepare. Preparations unfold efficiently. Fuel is moved deeper into the cave. The tent is secured against wind that might reach the entrance. Food supplies are inventoried and positioned for easy access. Everyone works together, the accumulated experience of weeks guiding movements that once required conscious thought. Routine serves. The storm arrives during the night. Wind screams across the landscape, driving snow horizontally past the cave entrance. The sound is tremendous, a roar that seems to come from everywhere at once. But inside the cave, the effect is muted. Walls that have stood for ages absorb the fury, reducing it to a distant howl. Shelter protects. You lie awake listening to the storm, wrapped in layers of clothing and shared warmth. The power outside is humbling. Humans have no business surviving in conditions like these. Yet, here you are, surviving. The cave, the fire, the companionship of others, these elements combine to create something stronger than any individual part. Together survives. The storm lasts 3 days. During that time, the group barely moves from the cave. Conservation of energy becomes paramount. Meals are small, activities are minimal. Conversation drifts through quiet hours, touching on memories, hopes, observations that seem unrelated until they suddenly connect. Stillness serves. Margaret shares more about her family during the storm's longest night. Her daughters are learning to read using books she selected before departing. Her husband writes letters he knows she cannot receive, simply because writing feels like communication, even when delivery is impossible. Love persists across distance. Love persists across silence. Love persists. Thomas speaks about his childhood for the first time, his voice quiet in the fire-lit darkness. He grew up in conditions nearly as harsh as these, the son of a trapper who taught him everything about surviving in cold places. The lessons were strict, sometimes harsh, but they made him who he is. He carries gratitude for that strictness now, even though he resented it as a child. Past shapes present. Elizabeth describes the moment she decided to become a physician. A neighbor's child fell ill, and the only doctor was days away. She watched the mother do what she could, improvising treatments from available materials. The child survived. Elizabeth decided then that she would learn to help people who had no one else to turn to. Purpose crystallizes. William talks about the future he imagines for himself. A farm somewhere green and warm. A family of his own. Work that connects him to the land without threatening his life. The vision is simple, perhaps naive, but it sustains him. Every person needs something to walk toward. Hope drives. Henrik does not share personal stories, but he listens with attention that communicates respect. His presence during these conversations feels important, a grounding force that keeps things from becoming too heavy. When laughter arises, he joins it. When silence falls, he lets it rest. Presence matters. The storm eventually passes. The world outside the cave looks transformed, covered in fresh snow that softens every edge. The group emerges slowly, blinking against the brightness, testing the air with tentative breaths. The cold feels sharper but cleaner. Everything seems renewed. Storms cleanse. Henrik checks the condition of the seal hunting areas. The storm has changed certain features but left others intact. He returns with cautious optimism. Survival remains possible. The group can continue as before. Continuity comforts. Days resume their earlier rhythm. Wake, eat, maintain, explore, rest. The storm becomes another memory, another story to tell around future fires. The group has weathered something significant together. The experience binds them in ways that ordinary circumstances never could. Shared struggle bonds. One morning, Thomas spots something unusual on the horizon. He calls the others to look. A dark shape moves against the ice, too large to be an animal, too regular in form to be a natural feature. The group watches in silence as the shape resolves into something unmistakable. A ship. A ship means rescue. Rescue means the end of this particular survival story. The emotions that flood through the group are complicated, a mixture of relief and something else that might be reluctance. The cave has become home. The routines have become comforting. Change, even positive change, carries its own kind of loss. Henrik builds a signal fire on the highest point of land. The smoke rises in a column visible for miles. Thomas adds fuel to increase the intensity. The others watch from below, tracking the ship's progress with anxious eyes. Waiting resumes. The ship changes course. It turns toward the smoke, toward the shore, toward 7 people who broke a sled in a blizzard and walked to land and survived. The approach takes hours. Anticipation makes time stretch unbearably. But the ship continues coming, growing larger with each slow minute. Hope approaches. When the rescue boat finally reaches the shore, the faces of the sailors carry expressions of amazement. They did not expect to find anyone alive in this place. The discovery of 7 survivors seems impossible to them. Questions pour out faster than answers can form. Astonishment arrives. The return to the ship feels dreamlike. You climb a rope ladder and step onto a deck made of wood that once grew in a forest far away. The vessel seems enormous after weeks of open ice and small cave. People move around you, offering food, warmth, medical attention. The abundance overwhelms. Rescue arrives. You find yourself standing at the ship's rail, looking back toward the shore that saved you. The cave is not visible from this distance. The land is just a dark mass against the white ice. But you know it's there. You know what happened there. You know what you survived. Memory preserves. Margaret joins you at the rail. She holds her journal against her chest, protecting the record of everything that happened. The pages contain a story that matters, not because it is unusual, but because it is real. Every detail, from the sled's destruction to this moment of rescue, exists now in written form. Words preserve. The ship begins moving away from the coast. The land shrinks slowly, becoming once again a distant shape on the horizon. You watch until it disappears completely, swallowed by the curve of the earth or the haze of Arctic air. Distance grows. You will tell this story to others. Some will believe it, some will doubt. But the truth of it lives inside you now, written in memories that no amount of warmth will ever erase. You survived the Arctic. You waited calmly when the sled broke. You walked toward land that might have been an illusion. You found shelter, found food, found hope. You survived. The ancient explorers who came before knew this feeling. They faced impossible odds and chose to continue anyway. Not because survival was guaranteed, but because giving up was never truly an option. That choice, repeated in every difficult moment, is what separates those who survive from those who do not. Choice matters. As the ship carries you toward civilization, you feel the Arctic growing smaller behind you. But it never truly disappears. It stays with you, a cold companion, a silent teacher, a reminder that patience and calm can carry you through almost anything. The Arctic remains. The ship's captain invites the survivors to his cabin for a warm meal. The food is simple by normal standards, but extraordinary after weeks of rationed provisions. Bread that is soft, soup that is hot, vegetables that are not frozen solid. Each bite carries flavor that seems almost overwhelming. Abundance returns. During the meal, the captain asks questions about the journey. How did the sled break? How far did you walk? How did you find shelter? His curiosity is genuine, tempered by respect for what the group has endured. He has sailed these waters for years and knows how easily they claim lives. Respect acknowledges. Margaret produces her journal and shows him some of the sketches. He studies them with professional interest, comparing her observations to his own charts. Several of her landmarks appear on his maps, confirming her navigation was accurate despite the challenges. Accuracy confirms. The captain mentions that the ship was not specifically looking for survivors. They were on a routine supply run to a northern trading post when the lookout spotted the smoke. Another hour in a different direction and they would have missed the signal entirely. Chance favors the prepared. The survivors exchange glances at this information. The margin between rescue and continued isolation was narrower than anyone imagined. A different wind, a different decision about when to build the signal fire, a different moment of attention from the lookout. Any of these variables could have changed everything. Gratitude deepens. Elizabeth asks about medical supplies aboard the ship. The captain directs her to the ship's surgeon, a man named Dr. Harrison, who immediately invites her to examine his dispensary. Their professional conversation drifts into the background as the others continue eating. Expertise connects. William asks about the ship's destination. The captain explains they will continue to the trading post as planned, then return south before winter truly sets in. The survivors will be transferred to a larger vessel heading home. Home. The word hangs in the air like a promise too good to believe fully. Home approaches. Henrik stands near the cabin window, looking out at the water. His expression is difficult to read. The ship represents safety, yes, but also separation from the land he knows better than anyone. The Arctic is his home in ways it can never be for the others. He will return someday. He always returns. Belonging persists. Thomas finishes his meal and thanks the captain formally. His manners, honed by years of working with different kinds of people, serve him well even after weeks of survival conditions. Civility endures. The days aboard ship pass differently than the days in the cave. The rhythm changes from survival to recovery. Meals appear at regular intervals. Sleep happens in actual bunks. The constant awareness of weather and shelter recedes into background concern. Comfort returns. Margaret spends much of her time completing her journal entries. She writes detailed accounts of each day on the ice, filling in gaps that exhaustion prevented her from recording earlier. The work becomes almost obsessive, as though she fears forgetting something essential. Memory demands attention. Elizabeth assists Dr. Harrison with various patients aboard ship. Her skills prove valuable in ways that surprise even her. The work gives her purpose during the voyage, a continuation of the role she played on the expedition. Purpose sustains. William recovers quickly, his youth providing resilience that amazes the ship's surgeon. The frostbitten toe heals without permanent damage. His strength returns with each passing day. Soon he is helping with shipboard tasks, unable to remain idle even when rest is recommended. Energy returns. Thomas maintains his watchful habits even aboard the ship. He studies the crew, the routines, the weather patterns visible from the deck. Old instincts die hard. Vigilance persists. Henrik spends hours at the ship's rail, watching the water and ice pass by. He speaks little during these times. His thoughts remain his own. Perhaps he is already planning his return to the north. Perhaps he is simply being present with a landscape he knows will not be visible much longer. Contemplation continues. The trading post appears on the horizon after several days of sailing. The settlement is small but busy, a hub of activity where supplies arrive and depart, where news travels in all directions, where civilization maintains its fragile foothold in the wilderness. Civilization approaches. The ship anchors in a protected harbor. Small boats ferry supplies and passengers to shore. The survivors step onto wooden docks that feel impossibly stable after weeks on ice and then weeks on water. Stability returns. The trading post offers amenities that seemed unimaginable just weeks ago. Warm buildings, proper beds, fresh food prepared by someone else. The survivors disperse to various accommodations, each person finding their own way to process the transition from survival to normal life. Adjustment begins. Margaret sends a message home via the post's communication system. Her words are brief but meaningful. She is alive, she is well, she is coming home. The message will take weeks to arrive, but the act of sending it provides its own comfort. Connection resumes. Elizabeth writes to colleagues about the medical observations she made during the expedition. The information might help future travelers. Her experience becomes data that can be studied and applied. Knowledge transfers. William writes to his sister, describing the adventure in terms that will make her proud without causing too much worry. The letter includes a promise to bring her something from the trading post, since Arctic ice proved impractical. He smiles while writing. Love expresses. Thomas writes nothing. He has no one waiting who would appreciate a letter. But he nods with quiet satisfaction when he learns the others are communicating with their families. Solitary contentment exists. Hendrik arranges to remain at the trading post when the larger ship departs southward. He has contacts here, connections to communities further north. His journey home will follow different routes than the others. Paths diverge. The day of departure arrives. The larger ship waits in the harbor, ready to carry the survivors south toward warmth and home and everything they left behind when they joined the expedition. Farewell approaches. Henrik says goodbye to each person individually. His handshakes are firm. His few words are sincere. He thanks them for the experience of traveling together, for sharing the cave, for surviving as a group. Gratitude expresses. You shake his hand and feel the calluses earned through years of Arctic work. His eyes meet yours with the calm that defined him throughout the journey. No elaborate speech, no promises to stay in touch. Just acknowledgement of what you shared. Understanding passes. The ship departs on a gray morning. Henrik stands on the dock watching until the vessel shrinks to a speck on the horizon. Then he turns and walks back toward the trading post, toward whatever comes next in his continuous Arctic life. Life continues. The voyage south takes weeks. The ship stops at various ports, taking on passengers and cargo, maintaining the commerce that connects distant communities. Each stop brings the survivors closer to home, closer to the lives they left behind. Progress accumulates. Margaret refines her journal into something closer to a formal account. She considers publishing it someday, sharing the story with readers who have never experienced the Arctic firsthand. The idea excites and frightens her in equal measure. Ambition stirs. Elizabeth reads medical texts available in the ship's small library. She makes notes about treatments she observed, remedies she improvised, outcomes she witnessed. The expedition provided education that no school could offer. Learning continues. William gains weight and strength as the voyage progresses. By the time the ship reaches its final destination, he looks almost like the young man who departed months earlier. Almost. Something in his eyes has changed. Experience transforms. Thomas helps with various shipboard tasks, unable to remain idle for long. The crew appreciates his competence and reliability. Quiet compliments reach his ears. Recognition affirms. The final port appears on a warm afternoon. The coastline looks impossibly green after months of white and gray. Trees rise from hills that seem almost tropical in their lushness. Warmth surrounds. The survivors disembark into a world transformed by their absence. Everything looks the same as before, yet everything feels different. They have changed in ways that familiar surroundings cannot reverse. Perspective shifts. Margaret's family waits on the dock. Her husband holds their daughters, one in each arm. The reunion unfolds in tears and embraces and words that tumble over each other in joyful chaos. Love reunites. Elizabeth is met by colleagues from her medical practice. Their questions begin immediately. Professional curiosity mixed with personal relief. She answers as best she can while walking toward a carriage that will take her home. Work resumes. William's sister breaks from a waiting group and runs toward him. Her embrace nearly knocks him over. The ice he promised has become a carved wooden figurine purchased at the trading post, a polar bear caught mid-stride. She loves it instantly. Promises fulfill. Thomas steps onto the dock alone and walks into the crowd without looking back. No one waits for him specifically, but the familiar streets welcome him in their own quiet way. Home remains. You stand on the dock as the others disperse. The journey is over. The survival is complete. The story has ended, though of course stories never truly end. They continue in memory, in retelling, in the ways they shape everything that comes after. The Arctic stays with you as you walk away from the harbor, the cold you felt, the silence you heard, the companions you relied upon, the calm you maintained when the sled broke and the blizzard raged and the horizon offered nothing but white uncertainty. The ancient explorers who came before knew this feeling. They carried their journeys with them forever, changed by experiences that could not be shared through words alone. You join their ranks now, another traveler who went into the cold and returned with something that cannot be taken away. The story ends here, but only this particular telling of it. The larger story continues in everyone who hears it and carries some small piece forward. Survival is not just physical. It is also passed along in words, in memories, in the shared understanding that humans can endure more than they imagine. Thank you for walking this frozen landscape with me. If you enjoyed the journey, consider subscribing to hear more stories like this one. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is in your world. Your presence here matters. And until next time, stay warm, stay calm, and never stop walking toward your horizon. The ancient explorers wait in patience. They have always waited. They will always wait. And now, so can you.